Welcome. This presentation is going to cover the Columbia and Snake Rivers north of Falcon, salmon, and steelhead seasons. I am Ryan Lothrop, the Columbia River Fishery Manager, and will be covering the first portion of this presentation, and additional WDFW staff will cover the remaining slides. This presentation is going to cover our North of Falcon and Pacific Fishery Management Council schedule and commenting opportunities, the harvest management jurisdictions, forecast and return slides, 2023 fishery summaries, and then the forecasts for 2024 and proposed seasons. This slide covers the 2024 meeting schedule for the North of Falcon public meeting process. Of importance, on March 21, the Columbia River public meeting will encompass fisheries from Buoy 10 up to Highway 395 at Pasco. And on March 27th, the northeast of McNary will cover the Hanford, Upper Columbia, and Snake River fisheries. And the North of Falcon and Pacific Fishery Management Council process will conclude on April 11th. And then the seasons will be finalized for this year. This website on the WDFW North of Falcon webpage provides the rulemaking information for recreational fisheries resulting from the 2024 North of Falcon process. You can provide your comments on this website and submit them below, and staff will review them and consider them in finalizing the rules. When developing salmon and steelhead seasons, we must consider the Endangered Species Act and harvest controls, Commission guidance, Pacific Salmon Treaty, tribal co-management, and the extensive monitoring and evaluation that we've conducted when collecting data statewide, such as from sport fishing creel, escapement counts, and forecasts. The Pacific Salmon Treaty is an agreement between the U.S. and Canada that provides resources to protect stocks so they can return to spawning grounds, but also share harvest opportunities. The Pacific Fishery Management Council is the process that establishes fishing regulations from 300 to 200 miles offshore for both salmon and groundfish opportunities. And the state process folds into that to establish regulations within the 3 miles to the state border. U.S. v. Washington is commonly known as the Bolt decision. This is the agreement and court decision reaffirming the rights of Washington Treaty tribes, focused primarily in the Puget Sound and coastal waters. U.S. v. Oregon is the court proceeding that provided fishing rights to the treaty tribes within the Columbia River for stocks destined upstream of Bonneville Dam. Additional jurisdictions include the states of Washington, Oregon, Fish and Wildlife Commission policies that provide allocations and allowable gears, the revised Code of Washington law that provides subsistence fishing for wampum ban, the Washington Department of Fish and Wildlife and Colville Share Agreement, and the Endangered Species Act. So from 2020 through 2023, we've been in a favorable set of conditions in the ocean for marine salmon survival, known as La Nina. However, we have transitioned into an El Nino event that corresponds with a lower survival for our salmon. So this figure shows both El Ninos and La Ninas dating back to the 1980s. As you can see, recently we exited the three-peat La Nina event, which is historically unusual, and entered a strong El Nino. However, the current forecasts indicate we may be exiting an El Nino this summer and possibly into a neutral state. This figure is known as the Ocean Indicator Chart that is produced by NOAA every year and updated with additional data. The red are lower scoring years, the yellow are more neutral, and the green are more positive or higher scoring years. This is split out by physical and biological indicators. So as you can see here, 2015 through 2017 would be years that juvenile salmon in the ocean had more poor scoring indicators or environmental variables, 2019, 2020 as well. In the green years, you can see more positive set of indicators with reference to salmon survival, such as 2021 through 2022. And in 2023, you can see it's not scoring out as well as the last couple of years, but it does rank 11th out of 26, so more of a neutral state for salmon out in the ocean as juveniles growing up into adults that return. So this is our forecast and return section. This first slide shows upriver salmonids. That includes Chinook, coho, sockeye, and steelhead. And you can see the trend has had a slight increase over time with fall Chinook primarily contributing to the abundance. But we've had some strong sockeye runs built in, and over time you can also see, unfortunately, the steelhead runs have dropped off. So this slide shows upriver spring Chinook and Snake River wild abundances. Upriver spring Chinook are spring Chinook that are destined above Bonneville Dam, and the Snake River wild are the ESA component that return to the Snake River. This year's forecast is 121,000, which is less than last year's actual return of 141,000. And the Snake River wild in black, this year's forecast is 9,200, which is lower than last year's actual return of 10,800 fish. The black line is the Snake River wild component. The dots are the forecast estimates. This is the Upper Columbia Spring Chinook and Wild slide. And so this year's forecast is 19,400, which is less than last year's actual return. And the Upper Columbia Spring Chinook Wild ESA components forecast for this year is 2,700 fish, which is below last year's actual return. This slide shows the upriver Spring Chinook broken into three components. The Upper Columbia River, which last year's return was just shy of 25,000. Snake River component, which was about 82,000 fish, and the Mid-Columbia, which is 33,800. Some of the stocks that return to the Mid-Columbia for reference would be like Drano and the Wind. This slide shows the Upper Columbia Summer Chinook, which are summer Chinook destined to waters upstream of Priest Rapids Dam. This year's forecast is 53,000 fish, which is below last year's return of 54,700 fish. This figure shows the Columbia River sockeye returns over time. As you can see, it is variable. 2 years ago, we had a historic high return, and this year's forecast is still considered strong at 401,700, which is larger than last year's return of 329,000 fish. This figure shows the Columbia River fall Chinook returns over time, which includes 7 management units. This year's forecast is 547,800 fish, which is less than last year's return. Returns in more recent years have been driven largely by the Upriver Bright Run, the Bonneville Pool Hatchery Tule, and Lower River Hatchery Tule stocks. The Upriver Bright Fall Chinook, this year's forecast is 258,300 fish, which is less than last year's actual return. For the ESA component, which is the Snake River Wild, this year's forecast is 9,300 fish, which is below last year's return of 12,420 fish. For Columbia River Coho, the ocean abundance forecast is 401,100 fish. Ocean abundance is the measure of the estimated fish prior to ocean fisheries. Last year's actual return of the early component is 365,000 fish. The early component migrates traditionally south of the Columbia River, and the late component for last year's actual return was 143,500 fish, which tend to migrate north of the Columbia River. This slide shows the Coho Passage at Bonneville Dam, known as Upriver Coho. Last year's actual passage through past Bonneville Dam was 132,192 fish, which included 106,000 early stock coho and 26,167 late stock. For A index summer steelhead, this year's forecast is 89,900, which is similar to last year's return. The ESA component, or the wild component, forecast for this year is 32,400, which is slightly higher than last year's actual return. For the B index summer steelhead, which are primarily 2 ocean salt fish, This year's forecast is 32,200 fish, which is larger than last year's return. The ESA component forecast for the wild component is 4,000 fish, which is above last year's return. As you can see in the figure here, we have an every other year strong return of B index steelhead, and that is our expectation for this year given the forecast. Here are last year's fisheries for the spring Chinook fishery all the way through the fall Chinook fishery. For 2024, we do have a mixed bag of forecasts, starting with upriver spring Chinook at 121,000 fish forecasted at the Columbia River mouth. That is below the 10-year average, which incorporates about 6,500 Snake River fish, 2,400 Yakima fish, and the icicle is forecasting about 4,500 to 5,000 fish. For upper Columbia summer Chinook, that 53,000 fish, that is below the 10-year average. For upriver bright fall Chinook, we are also below the 10-year average with 258,300 fish. The Hanford Reach has a forecast of 64,800, and the Snake River has a forecast of about 26,100 fish. For upriver summer steelhead, we have a total forecast of 89,900 A index fish, of which 32,400 are wild, and that is below the 10-year average for the hatchery and wild components. And for the B index, we have a total forecast of 32,200, of which 4,000 are wild. For the combined forecast, that is above the 10-year average, but slightly below the 10-year average for the wild component. The sockeye forecast is 401,700, which is above the 10-year average. This incorporates an Okanagan forecast of 288,700 fish and a Lake Wenatchee forecast of 97,000 fish. Here's some information with regards to recreational fisheries in the main stem Columbia River downstream of Bonneville Dam. Starting with spring Chinook, we have similar forecasts for lower river stocks, while reduced abundance for upriver stocks. Columbia River Compact and Joint State Hearing had already scheduled this fishery, and the pre-update fisheries open through April 5th. For summer Chinook fishery, we do anticipate some limited fishing opportunity, and sockeye, we do expect more standard fishing seasons. For the fall Chinook season, we are going to consider in-season stability measures such as mark selective regulations within the buoy 10 area, salmonid angling day or block closures, consideration of effort shift, and historically high handle rates. This is in effect an attempt to limit or reduce the risk of in-season closures. We do anticipate some similar fishing opportunities last year, given the abundance is similar. For coho, there should be a more standard fishing season in the buoy 10 area and some limited opportunities within the rest of the lower river. For upriver summer steelhead, we anticipate limited harvest opportunity given the forecasts are low as compared to historic returns, and barbless hooks will be required. Moving upstream in the main stem Columbia River for recreational fisheries from Bonneville Dam to Highway 395 at Pasco, starting with spring Chinook, given the slightly reduced upriver abundance, the season schedule has been set by the Joint State Hearing to be open April 1 through May 2 for the pre-update fishery. Summer Chinook, it does anticipate some limited fishing opportunity, and we expect a standard sockeye fishing opportunity. For fall Chinook, the upriver bright and Snake River wild component catches may limit the fishery in season, but we anticipate a standard season start. And for coho, the forecast is large enough to provide harvest opportunities. Again, upriver summer steelhead, given the abundances are low, they'll have similar harvest restrictions, but limited harvest opportunity included as well. And barbless hooks are required.
Hello, I'm Josua Holowatz, the WDFW Region 5, District 10 Fisheries Biologist, and I'm here to speak to you about Washington tributaries upstream to the Dalles Dam. Our fall Chinook preseason forecasts are for 73,500 lower river hatchery, also known as Thule fall Chinook, and 8,100 lower river wilds, also known as Lewis or Sandy Bright fall Chinook. Our tributaries will be open under permanent rules except for the Green River in Cowlitz County, where the proposed daily salmon limit will be 3 coho adults, but no Chinook retention. Tributaries without rule change proposals include the Elokaman, the Cowlitz, the Toutle Rivers, North Fork and South Fork, Lewis River, the Kalama, Washougal River, Drano Lake, and the Klickitat. Thank you very much.
Hi, I'm Matt Gardner, the District 9 fish biologist with Washington Department of Fish and Wildlife. Based on preseason forecasts for upriver summer steelhead during 2024, WDFW plans to continue implementation of angling regulations that support our steelhead conservation strategy. These include, during the months of July through October, steelhead angling and retention closures, as well as night closures for both salmon and steelhead. The areas where these regulations occur are in the lowest reaches, in confluence areas of the Wind River, White Salmon, and Klickitat rivers, as well as Drano Lake. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Trevor Hutton. I'm the Region 3 Fish Program Manager, and I will be presenting on the Yakima River and Columbia River Hanford Reach forecasts and seasons. We'll start with spring Chinook. Our spring Chinook fishery in the Yakima River is likely not happening this year. We've got a preseason forecast of just about 2,400 fish, which is significantly down from what we've seen in prior years. At this point, we're anticipating that this will remain closed unless we have a surprise run that shows up at much higher numbers at Prosser Dam. If that were to happen, there would be an emergency regulation to open that fishery. Moving to the Columbia for our summer fisheries, we've got opportunities for sockeye this year with 4 fish and 1 Chinook. We're going to have 2 separate areas, the first being the Highway 395 to I-182. The only portion of this fishery that's open is the Columbia Point Bank fishery, and that's going to run from June 16th to July 15th. Above the I-182 bridge, we're going to have the season open from June 16th to August 15th. In both of these areas, the daily limit is 6 salmon, but as I said, only 4 adults may be retained. Only one of those may be a Chinook. So it's primarily going to be a sockeye fishery in that reach. We had asked that you release all wild adult Chinook. The use of 2 poles is permitted and barbless hooks are allowed. Continuing on for our fall fisheries, we're going to have a fishery in the Yakima River for adult Chinook. There's a forecast of about 2,400 of those fish, and we plan on fishing September 15th to November 15th. Those dates were shifted later to allow for additional opportunities for later returning coho. In the Columbia River, our Hanford Reach Fall Chinook forecast is a bit down from last year with 64,800 adults. This includes about 14,000 wild fish and 50,000 hatchery fish. We've had fewer wild fish on the reach the last several years, and so we're going to be remaining with a 1 adult limit for both coho and Chinook. If the wild component is tracking below what we expect, it is possible that we may close portions of the reach early. In this fishery, we do have the use of 2 poles permitted. Barbed hooks are allowed. And as far as the specific areas for the Hanford Reach fishery, there are some minor changes to some of the dates. For that lower reach from the Highway 395 bridge to the I-182 bridge, we have bumped that season about another week later to account for Yakima River fish staging in those areas until the breakdown of a thermal barrier. It's possible we could open that area earlier by emergency regulation, depending on temperatures and fish passage in the Yakima River. Above the I-182 bridge, we've got the season open from September 1 to December 31st to allow for that extended coho fishery near Ringgold Springs hatchery. And above the power lines, that season will run August 16th to October 15th. After our fall fisheries, there is additional opportunity for ringgold steelhead. As you've probably heard in other portions of this presentation, our steelhead numbers continue to be low, although they are better than they have been the last couple years. Specifically for ringgold spring steelhead, we anticipate leaving this fishery open from October 1st to March 31st, and then an additional couple weeks of bank-only fishing in April. The limit here is 1 hatchery steelhead. They must be dual clipped, both their adipose fin and the right ventral fin. We will continue to monitor this fishery and forecasts and determine if any changes are needed in season. Thanks.
Hi, my name is Chad Jackson. I'm the Region 2 Fish Program Manager, and I'm going to be talking about salmon and steelhead fisheries in the upper Columbia River between Priest Rapids Dam and Chief Joe Dam. To start off, we'll talk about Icicle River Spring Chinook. We highly anticipate there's going to be a season this year. The preliminary forecast is around 4,500 to 5,000, but I will caution anglers that this is very, very preliminary. The forecast methodology really relies on the detection of pit tag, returning adult spring Chinook through the dam system. And really that doesn't get going until April and May. And so that forecast could be a little bit higher, could be a little bit lower. But given the last couple years, we really think this season will open. And so if we do open the season, it'll be through emergency rule change. So please check the department's website, and the season structure will be the same as last year. So late May through June, a daily limit of 2 or 3 hatchery spring Chinook, depending upon what the run size is, mandatory retention of those hatchery spring Chinook, and a night closure. Moving on to main stem Columbia River Chinook and sockeye seasons. So all seasons will be in the 24-25 sport fishing rules pamphlet. So check the pamphlet for complete details. But what we're looking at is similar to the last handful of years. Daily limit is 6 salmon, minimum size 12 inches, no more than 2 adult hatchery Chinook, and no more than 4 sockeye, release coho, and wild adult Chinook. The use of 2 poles will be permitted with a valid endorsement. And as we move through the different pools, Priest Rapids to Rock Island Dam will be July 1st through October 31st. Rock Island Dam to Wells Dam will be July 1st through October 15th. The Wells Dam to Brewster Bridge is a little bit of a later start, July 16th, and a little bit earlier closure on September 30th. This is to protect spring Chinook on the front end and listed steelhead on the back end. The Brewster Bridge will be open to Chief Joseph Dam will be open from July 1st to October 15th. However, I want to make anglers known of a potential area Chinook closure around the mouth of the Okanagan, and I'll take a little bit of time here. So in the Okanagan River, we have some acclimation ponds, Omak Pond, Similkameen Pond, and this is where we raise and release our integrated hatchery Chinook, and integrated means that they are produced from wild broodstock. And as other anglers know, that Chinook return is age 3, 4, 5, and 6, with the bulk being age 4 and 5, usually mid 90s to high 90% range. Well, the releases from the 2019 and 2020 brood years were met with some pretty catastrophic losses. Most notably, the 2019 brood, there was a huge rain on snow event in the Similkameen, the Canadian portion of the Similkameen River, that created a 1,000-year flood, and that input a whole bunch of silt into the acclimation ponds, and we were only able to rear those juveniles for a little better than a couple of months. And so they were released very young. They weren't migratory. They also had some disease and some other issues, and so we feel that those fish probably had pretty poor survival, and we're not anticipating a lot of adults come back. For the age 5-year fish, we released those fish, and we really got really poor detections downstream in the Columbia River. And while we don't have a cause yet, it was pretty reminiscent of the previous year that had poor returns. And so this is a situation where we may take some precautionary measures to ensure that we get enough fish to return that we can spawn, and enough wild fish to be able to produce these fish, so that in the future we have full releases and we can have full fisheries. I do want to emphasize that this decision isn't final. We are working with the Colville tribe to identify the best action here. And if there is a closure, it would just be for Chinook, not sockeye, and it'd probably be somewhere from the Brewster Bridge upstream of the mouth of the Okanagan. So stay tuned for that. Tributary summer Chinook seasons. Again, these will be in the sport fishing rules pamphlet. Check your pamphlet for complete details. Wenatchee River, August 1st to September 30th. Daily limit 6 salmon, no more than 2 adult hatchery Chinook, and release sockeye, coho, and wild Chinook. There'll be night closure and selective gear rules, except bait will be allowed. Moving upstream, the Entiat River. Again, this is this really unique and gaining in popularity Chinook fishery. The history here is that summer Chinook were never endemic into the Entiat River, and a lot of the fish with intact adipose fins are actually produced from hatchery fish. So we offer this as a non-marked selective fishery. It's a daily limit 6 Chinook, minimum size 12 inches. Doesn't matter whether it's jacks, adults, clipped or unclipped. There'll also be a night closure on the Entiat River. Again, moving upstream to the Chelan River, will be open July 16th through October 15th. Daily limit 6 salmon, minimum size 12 inches, no more than 2 adult hatchery Chinook, release sockeye, coho, and wild adult Chinook. There'll be a night closure as well as an anti-snagging rule. So the Okanagan and Similkameen rivers, again, I won't go into detail because I went into detail for the main stem there around the confluence with the Okanagan. But again, we might have some potential salmon fishing closures in there to allow Chinook to spawn, to not have much of an impact, and also to ensure that future releases are full and strong. But again, this decision isn't final. We're working with the Colville tribe, so stay tuned. But we wanted to let anglers know this potential this season. Lake Wenatchee sockeye season. Last season was really great, huge return, and we're very optimistic there will be a season. But again, it's technically to be determined. We need to see how the full sockeye run materializes this summer through the Columbia River, as well as what we're counting over Tumwater Dam and into Lake Wenatchee. So we're forecasting somewhere around 97,000. We'll monitor the run in season. And if we open a season, it'll be through emergency rule change. So again, check out the department webpage and stay tuned for that season. Usually that ends up being late July through September show. Moving to fall Chinook seasons. Again, these will be in the 24-25 sport fishing rules pamphlet. Check your pamphlet for complete details. And these are between Priest Rapids and Rock Island Dam. And if you saw during the summer season, that fishery for summers and sockeye closes at the end of August. Well, that's the make way for this non-marked selective fall Chinook fishery, September 1st through October 15th. And the reason being is a majority of the fall Chinook hatchery fish are not externally masked marked. And so they tend to be overshoots of Priest Rapids hatchery. And so we provide anglers with that opportunity to harvest a couple fish. The use of 2 poles will also be permitted during this fishery. Coho, to be determined. Coho are still a little bit of boom and bust, but I think that their runs are starting to establish a lot better. It's going to be based off of what we see over Priest Rapids Dam. And if we open, it'll be through emergency rule change. So again, check the department's website. The 2 fisheries that we've had, probably the most productive one is the Icicle River fishery that usually is in October through November. That's certainly gaining some popularity and some folks have had some pretty good success there. And then also we've opened up the main stem Columbia River, usually from about mid-September through mid-October, which coincides with the open summer Chinook seasons in the Columbia River. And the main reason we can't expand much more at the moment here is we don't have ESA coverage throughout the upper Columbia River to have standalone coho fisheries, although we are working on that and we're hoping to get that done soon so we can extend that opportunity after summer Chinook closes. Steelhead season to be determined. However, 2023 was the highest return since 2015. We had right around 8,400 fish. So it's really encouraging. We were close last year to that 9,550, and the run is a little bit improved overall for the entire Columbia. So fingers crossed that we actually get enough steelhead over that maybe we'll have a fishery this year for them. However, we do have to meet minimum run sizes, not only for the total steelhead run, but the natural origin or wild fish component over Priest Rapids Dam before we can open up a fishery. And those minimum numbers are 9,550 total steelhead, of which 1,300 must be wild steelhead. So any opener will be through emergency rule. So as October time comes around, keep an eye on those fish counts, keep an eye on the website, and ask all the anglers to keep their fingers crossed that maybe we'll get a steelhead season for the first time in about 10 years. And with that, I'll turn it over to Chris Donnelly, and he'll talk about the Snake Basin fisheries.
I'm Chris Donnelly. I'm the Regional Fish Program Manager for Region 1, which covers the Snake River portion of the Columbia Basin. For Region 1, the Snake River Basin, I will cover spring Chinook, fall Chinook, coho, and steelhead fisheries. For spring Chinook, we plan to open Little Goose and Ice Harbor areas for 2 days per week. We estimate opening this fishery the first week in May under emergency rules depending on run timing. The allocation for the Snake River is 493 fish. We do not anticipate opening on weekend days due to the fact that we have very few fish in the allocation. The rules will be very similar to last year or years previous. A daily limit of 6 salmon, only one hatchery adult may be retained. For fall Chinook, we will offer a fishery in the Clarkston area upstream consistent with what you've seen the past few seasons. This will open August 18th and run through the end of October under emergency rule. The limit will likely be daily limit of 3 adult Chinook, no limit on jacks. We will also offer a fall Chinook fishery at Lions Ferry, similar to the fishery held in 2023. The fishery will open in early September and run Thursday through Sunday under emergency rule. The daily limit will be 2 adult Chinook, one of which may be unmarked, and there will be no daily limit on jacks. If we achieve wild impacts, the area may be reduced to a mark selective or hatchery fish only fishery prior to the end of the season. For coho fisheries, they are possible. However, the forecast is much lower than it has been the past couple years, and we do not anticipate a fishery at this time. If we have a fishery, it will be broadcast to the public and held under emergency rule. For steelhead fisheries, we anticipate what we have seen in the past few years. We do not anticipate a larger run for the 24 season. We will evaluate steelhead returns at Bonneville Dam and at Lower Granite Dam, and will adjust 3 seasons through emergency rules. Anglers can expect the rules will be out around the first week in September. The seasons could include reduced limits, size restrictions, and area closures based on abundance through tributaries or in the main stem Snake River. And finally, I will cover summer steelhead forecasts and proposed seasons for the entirety of the Columbia Basin. Since 2017 through 2023, fisheries limitations were primarily based on low B run forecasts, with 2020 through 2023 also focused on low A run forecasts. For 2024, there will be continued low A run and B run forecasts relative to pre-2017 returns of runs substantially larger than 200,000 fish. The 2024 forecast is 128% of the recent 5-year average return, but only 52% of the 20-year average return. There appears to be an upward trend in survival for steelhead. However, steelhead numbers are still well below abundance targets where full fisheries can be offered basin-wide. There is forecast uncertainty with regards to one ocean returning fish. The A run is primarily comprised of these one ocean fish. Given the uncertainty, run sizes will be updated mid-season or in-season starting mid-August for A index fish and mid-September for B index fish. The resulting seasons from this forecast, there will be rolling block closures similar to what we saw 2017 through 23 from the mouth of the Columbia beginning in August and continue upstream as the run progresses, including night closures. Tributaries above Bonneville Dam, for example, Drano Lake, will be closed to fishing for steelhead beginning July 1st through October 31st. There will be no catch and release fishing allowed for steelhead, and there will be a night closure. Expect open fishing but possibly abbreviated seasons on the Snake River and tributaries. Anglers should not expect to fish the upper Columbia River and tributaries above Priest Rapids Dam. In many areas, there will be abbreviated hatchery harvest limits, for example, 1 fish. If actual returns are lower than what is anticipated, there may also only be catch and release opportunity afforded to the anglers. This is a graphical representation of the season structure that we propose for the Columbia Basin for steelhead. We thank you for taking the time to review this presentation. If you have comments, you can submit them at the URL listed here. Otherwise, you are welcome to reach out to regional contacts at the numbers listed or send emails to those individuals in regions 1, 2, 3, and 5. Thank you for your time and enjoy the rest of your day.